Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to talk about some of the news that's come out for the sequel to Joker, which I'm going to butcher its name. It was Joker FolieàDeux. I know I'm butchering that terribly, but basically the rough translation is basically like a shared madness between two or more people is kind of the general gist. And obviously that's led to a lot of conversations and theories about what Joker 2 is going to be. And obviously at the time of recording this, more potential, nothing's official in the Lady Gaga Harley Quinn stuff, which we'll talk about later, but just focusing on the title in itself has led to many people having different theories about what that can mean. Obviously there's the conversation of, well, you know, initially it's like, right, a shared madness amongst two or more people. Are they talking about the potentiality of, hey, we're just talking about the city itself, Gotham getting enthralled by the madness that is Joker? And basically the end of the movie, how so many people got swept up in his madness. The movie does end with a way of being like, oh, was that all in his head or was it real? Which could definitely lean into that. But especially like, right, an entire group of, I mean, he does, you know, eventually have his own gang eventually, typically. So maybe you could lean into that and kind of, you know, the people who admire him and are able to go cut loose a little bit, be like, right, him being their symbol of anarchy. There's that element to it, but then there's also the theory and many people, it's not like I'm the only one who's had this, but I've always thought it was an interesting theory, was that the Joker we got, because a lot of people were saying like Joaquin Phoenix's Joker isn't the typical like clown prince of crime that you're typically associated with in most Joker things, most DC related stuff with Joker. So a theory some people had, and I think Todd Phillips even kind of fanned the flames of that, being like, right, who's to say that Joaquin Phoenix's Joker is the Joker that we know, that he didn't eventually inspire him. The reference I've always used, and an example to that, is Gotham. Gotham had set it up. They never really did it, but initially, spoilers, when Jerome originally died, they set it up to be like, oh, maybe because he inspired a whole, you see like a whole bunch of kids watching his message when him and like the Maniacs were running around. I think that was their character, that was their group's name. But when they were running around, he inspired so many kids even though he was dead. So they set it up the potentiality that some kid he inspired would eventually become the Joker, but it ended up, spoilers, being his twin brother. That was a whole thing. He actually kind of forged his twin brother basically into the Joker. You know, Joker went down its own route. I mean, to be fair, it plays into the character's origin always being so different, you know, and unclear. So it kind of plays into that. It leaves that room for you to do whatever you want to, like they did with the Joker movie, what they did with it in Gotham, what they did with Joker's origin to some extent in the Telltale Batman game, which we're going to talk about that a little bit later on when it comes to some of the Harley Quinn stuff. But so that's kind of a potentiality, is like, right, that Joaquin Phoenix's Joker inspires the person who will become the more traditional Joker. Because, you know, because initially they've set it up to be like, oh, Bruce and Arthur are half brothers. So I always thought that is such an interesting dynamic in that universe, and make it that Batman and Joker have an even deeper connection, that, you know, maybe when the Joker event, whenever Batman would be born and created, it's like, oh, we have this special connection. But even if later on it's someone else that's inspired by the Joker, there's always going to be that through line of the Waynes tied to the Joker, and then the fact is that the person that was, you know, Bruce may never know that full connection, but as the audience knowing that would be such an interesting element. But yeah, I like the idea of like, oh, like, you inspired a person who will eventually become the clown prince of crime, the Joker that most people would be associated with. I think that'd be such an interesting thing. Like, would he die at the end of the second movie and that person would rise? Would that new Joker come and end up killing Arthur's Joker or something like that? You know, questions like that, like the passing of the torch and the passing of the crown, like that, in that regard. I mean, I could definitely it's been a while since I've seen the first movie. Like, did he do that? No. I was about to say, because for whatever in my head I was thinking, like, when he put the smile on his own face in blood, for whatever reason I kept associating in my head like he did it to Bruce, but he's like, no, he didn't. They didn't interact at the end when his parents died. At least I haven't seen the movie since it originally came out in theaters. But I don't think so. But I was thinking like maybe he could do that to the kid who will eventually become the Joker, or maybe the kid who will become the traditional Joker finds his body, takes the blood, smears it on his face, and, you know, that's the whole shebang of like, this is the true birth of like the Joker we typically know. So there's that. Then we go into what I was bringing up earlier, the Harley Quinn angle of it, because there have been rumors, nothing's set in stone at the time of recording this, maybe by the time this video goes up, which this should go up Monday, maybe some news will come out to be like, okay, it's official now, but Lady Gaga is in talks to play Harley Quinn, which I think is going to be interesting, because considering how the movie ended, he's in a mental institute. I don't know if it was necessarily Arkham Asylum, you'll assume it is, but the question then becomes like, right, she's probably not Harley Quinn yet. She's probably still Harleen Quinzel, Dr. Harleen Quinzel. So that adds the element of, okay, so maybe it's not, as he's becoming more associated with being the Joker, maybe he's found his counterpart. Once again, the shared madness that, I mean, because the question then becomes like, well, how they handle the dynamic. Because I forgot who I was watching recently. I want to say it was the Geek Buddies. They talked about, I want to say it might have been Mike in particular who talked about how, it might have been Mike, who talked about how the dynamic in more recent years across a lot of medium, whether it's the animated Harley Quinn series, whether it's, you know, Harley Quinn in the movies played by Margot Robbie, whether it's going from Suicide Squad to Birds of Prey to The Suicide Squad, like her arc across those movies, the whole, you know, dynamic of typically the Joker made Harley Quinn, and that's always been this toxic, like, abusive relationship that they have, but she's grown past that to become her own person. So my thought was, what if they did basically what they did, an inverse with Telltale Batman, because if you're unaware, spoilers, in season 2 of Telltale's Batman, Harley Quinn is introduced along with Joker got introduced in season 1, but he was just John Doe at the time. He actually doesn't fully become Joker until like the end, which obviously you can go different routes depending on your choices and such of like which lane he goes as Joker. I'll leave it at that. But in that, Harley Quinn's the more dominant personality, and he's the one that's so love-struck. So they did an inverse of the typical Harley and Joker relationship in that, which is such a fascinating twist on that dynamic. What if they do that, where it seems like, no, Arthur's not the dominant personality. In fact, she is. That, you know, it kind of gets into that, oh, like a doctor crossing those personal boundaries into a very uncomfortable way, and she has so much sway and power over him as not only his doctor and physician, but, you know, and we start getting into those complicated territories. So I think that'd be an interesting lane to kind of play it out, rather than him, like, you know, seducing her. Rather than Joker making a Harley Quinn, she makes herself Harley Quinn by fully making him the Joker or something like that. I think there's a lot you could play with that dynamic. What's also interesting too is the talks about the movie potentially being a musical, which I think would be interesting. And even then, I've heard some interesting thoughts about that, about how you could definitely play with that in the movie. Like, right, maybe like there's some dance sequences and stuff like that, and it's like, oh, you bust into like musical numbers and stuff, but maybe it's only Arthur who's seeing that and experiencing that, or maybe him and Harley are experiencing that, but no one else is, and it just starts playing into the boundaries of what is real, what isn't, what's all in his head, what is, you know, start playing with that, those thematics even more. So I think that'd just be an interesting approach to it. I think some people, I've heard so many people talk about, like, a lot of people I've heard from have been like, oh man, they're all about the idea. They heard like it's going to be a musical. They're like, oh man, that's so weird. Do it. Because DC, I think, does a really good job when they really lean into like their weird aspects of certain things. Like, you get weirdo shows like DC's Legends of Tomorrow and Doom Patrol, which goes balls to the wall crazy with some of like their themes and elements, that it shows like DC can go nuts with what they do, and especially if you package it in a really interesting way, like a musical. Like, there's a lot of themes and elements you could play to with that. So it would have never crossed my mind to think of like Lady Gaga would have never been a name I would have immediately been like, oh, Harley Quinn, that's interesting. Yes, you get into that territory of like, oh my god, we have technically 3 Jokers running around. Now we're going to technically have 3 Harley Quinn, because there's the animated Harley Quinn, there's Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, and now potentially another Harley Quinn. Once again, if they go down that route, all the talks were like, nothing ever officially, even amongst the rumors, said that she was Harley Quinn, just that she was potentially going to be like a female lead in it or something like that. It's been a conversation. So she might not even be Harley, she might be some other character. Kind of how they did in Gotham, because Gotham's had a Harley Quinn-esque character that wasn't fully Harley, you know? So maybe they could do something similar in that regard. I mean, these are just some of the thoughts going through my head based on what we know so far. Like I said, there could be even more coming out. Things could become more official later on. But I'd love to get to know your thoughts in the comments down below. One, first and foremost, were you excited for the notion of there being a Joker sequel? This is something they've been kind of teasing for a while. Obviously, the initial thought was this was going to be an Elseworlds thing. It's going to be a one-off. Some people have an issue with the fact is now you're saying like, oh, understandable. The movie made over $1 billion, so it's like, yeah, and it was kind of like a higher mid-budget movie of like $70 million budget. It's like, and you made $1 billion. Like, come on, like, of course DC's going, but also it's been a couple years, so it's not like it's just like, oh, they immediately jumped on it. It's like, no, it's been like, you know, I think the script is done now, and now it's just a matter of, I think, you know, probably like pre-production stuff, and all that has to be kind of ironed out and stuff like that. But still, are you someone that is down for the sequel, or are you just kind of like, I wish it was just a one and done? Maybe you felt like that initially, and with some of the news that's come out, have you felt about it? Have you liked some of it? Have you liked all of it? Have you hated all of it? Has it changed your tune? And if you were someone who didn't like the idea of a Joker sequel, I'd love to know everyone's thoughts, see where everyone stands when it comes to this whole situation. Just let me know all your thoughts in the comments. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.